Welcome back, and let's step directly into another story carried on the rhythm of the success mindset. Before the tale truly unfolds, imagine the invitation at the start, the soft prompt to share where in the world you are listening from, the gentle way it sets the stage for a community gathered in different corners of the globe, all leaning in together. And then the curtain rises, opening on Chapter 1. The Perfect Life Unraveling. Wade Wu was a man who believed, down to the marrow of his bones, that he had crafted his existence from nothing but grit, determination, and the scars of survival. At 42, he stood as proof of self-made success. 3 thriving auto repair shops spread across the county, a sprawling home tucked into the hillside with commanding views, and the comfort of what he thought was a faithful marriage to Jessica Wu. His hands, hardened and calloused from years of real work, told the story of sacrifice, while his sharp mind spoke to the relentless calculation it had taken to climb out of poverty. Wade never forgot the alleys he had walked as a boy or the mentors who gave him a hand up. Every dollar earned, every customer won, and every expansion he opened was a monument to the fact that he had fought his way into prosperity when the world expected him to fail. That particular autumn evening seemed unremarkable at first, the kind of evening that passes without notice in the slow rhythm of married life. Wade sat in his office at home, glasses perched low on his nose, studying quarterly reports with the steady diligence of a man who kept score with numbers. Jessica drifted in and announced she was heading across town to visit her sister, Gail McIntosh. There was nothing unusual about it. The sisters had always been close, and their wine and movie nights often stretched late into the next day. Wade kissed her goodbye, only half aware of how carefully she'd done her makeup for what was supposed to be a casual evening. He thought nothing of it until hours later, when an unexpected chill of dread settled in his stomach. 3 hours after Jessica drove away, Wade found himself trailing behind a patrol car on Highway 47, his headlights illuminating a reality he could not yet name. Jessica's BMW had been pulled over, and even that small detail jarred Wade. Jessica was cautious to the point of frustration. She never sped, never bent rules, never cut corners. Seeing her car pulled to the side with flashing lights dancing red and blue across its frame was like catching a glimpse of something that simply should not exist. The officer handling the stop introduced himself as Seth Mayer, a young man in his early 30s whose clean-cut, earnest face still carried that rare quality of believing in doing what was right. As he leaned into Jessica's window and ran her license, Wade saw the officer's expression shift. The rote boredom of a routine traffic stop gave way to something more deliberate, a dawning seriousness that sent a tremor through the night. Mayer's eyes flicked from the glowing computer screen to Jessica, then toward Wade with a mixture of hesitation and pity that turned Wade's veins to ice. "Sir," the officer said carefully as he stepped toward Wade's car, his voice threaded with nerves. "I need you to listen very carefully. Do not go home tonight. Get somewhere safe." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Wade felt the blood drain from his face, leaving him cold and rigid behind the wheel. "What? Why? What's wrong?" His voice cracked in the quiet space between the flashing lights. Mayer darted a glance around as if the very shadows might be listening, before slipping a folded piece of paper into Wade's palm. His whisper carried both urgency and dread. "I can't explain right now. Legally, my hands are tied, but that woman isn't who you think she is, and neither is the man waiting at your house." Wade's thoughts fractured into sharp, jagged edges. What man? What could this possibly mean? The officer simply said, "Read the note. Tonight, don't confront anyone. Be smart." Then, with the smooth professionalism of someone trying to erase what had just happened, he returned Jessica's license, gave her a polite warning, and wished her a good evening. But Wade had caught the flash of disgust across Mayer's face, a flash that revealed more than any words could. Jessica slid back into her BMW, brushing it off with nervous chatter about how odd the officer had been, filling the silence with too many words. Wade nodded distantly, the folded note searing against his skin like it carried fire. He suggested dinner before heading to Gail's place, a stalling move to buy himself time. At the restaurant, while Jessica disappeared into her phone, Wade excused himself and slipped into the bathroom, his heart hammering as he unfolded the note with trembling hands. The words were concise, merciless, and life-shattering. Your wife has been seeing Patrick Mullins for 8 months. Tonight, he's in your house, going through your safe. She gave him the combination. There's more. Much more. She's been planning this for years. I'm sorry. I wish I could do more. A friend who remembers you helped his family when no one else would. Wade stared until the letters blurred. Patrick Mullins. The name was familiar, almost nauseating in its familiarity. Patrick had once worked at his first shop years ago, a charming man with fast hands and even faster excuses whenever money went missing from the till. Wade had fired him without pressing charges, believing back then in the mercy of second chances. Now it seemed Patrick had been carrying a grudge and scheming revenge ever since. But Jessica, his Jessica, the woman who had stood by him through cancer scares, her father's bankruptcy, endless struggles and triumphs, how could she have orchestrated such betrayal? 15 years of shared life collapsed inward with the weight of those words. When Wade returned to the table, he forced his face into stillness, every emotion masked behind an unreadable calm. Jessica sat angled away from him, texting furiously, her phone tilted so he could not see the screen. Details he had once ignored now stood out in garish relief. The secrecy, the late-night excuses, the weekends away with friends he'd never met. She looked up with feigned innocence and asked, "Everything okay, honey?" Wade smiled tightly, a smile that, for the first time in their marriage, held the opposite of truth. "Perfect," he said. The drive to Gail's house felt like a descent into hell stretched across 20 agonizing minutes. Jessica kept glancing at her phone, her eyes flicking nervously between screens and the road, while Wade sat in silence, replaying every moment of their marriage like evidence at a trial. The foundation of his life hadn't just cracked. It revealed itself to be nothing but an illusion. When they arrived, Wade claimed a work emergency. Jessica's relief was obvious, too quick, almost comical in its transparency. She kissed him goodbye with lips that had likely kissed Patrick hours earlier. Rage surged hot in his chest, and it took every ounce of his self-control not to crush her betrayal in his fist then and there. But Wade was not a man who built empires through impulse. Patience had been his greatest weapon, patience sharpened by the streets that had once tried to consume him. As he drove away, he knew one thing with absolute clarity. If Jessica and Patrick thought they could unravel his life, they were about to learn the cost of underestimating him. By the time his car merged with the downtown lights, Wade had already begun to plan. Wade checked into the Riverside Hotel under a name that only those who knew him would recognize as a habit rooted in survival. He paid in cash, a relic from his past when every transaction needed to stay off the grid, when trust was earned and betrayal came cheap. The hotel sat high enough that from his fifth-floor room, his house, a gleaming monument to betrayal, was visible just a few miles away, nestled like an accusing shadow in the hills. From that vantage, the distance between comfort and ruin could be measured in minutes, yet tonight, it felt like an abyss. He didn't wait. He called his lawyer, Oliver Doyle, a man bound to him by favors paid long ago in the currency of loyalty and gratitude rather than contracts. Oliver had once been a public defender, barely holding his life together when Wade, in a rare moment of unchecked fury, had hunted down gang members responsible for vandalizing his shop. Wade's message then had been clear enough to put an end to threats. Oliver had never forgotten it, and neither had Wade. I need surveillance equipment, professional grade. Deliver it to this hotel room within 2 hours. No exceptions. Wade's voice, cool and steady, betrayed none of the turmoil that churned beneath it. Also, I need complete documentation on Patrick Mullins. Employment history, criminal record, financial statements, known associates, everything. 2 hours. I don't care what it takes. There was a silence long enough for Wade to hear Oliver wrestling with the moral weight of such a request. But gratitude, once owed, is a debt stronger than hesitation. "I'll make some calls," Oliver finally answered, his voice low. "You'll have it." While waiting, Wade sat by the window with binoculars retrieved from his car. His eyes scanned every inch of his property, cataloging angles, access points, vulnerabilities. At 12:47 a.m., the figure appeared, a shadow moving from the side door, his side door reserved for family, private and trusted. Even from this distance, Wade could distinguish the swagger in Patrick's stride, that easy arrogance of a man who moved as though he owned every space he trespassed into. Patrick carried a bag suspiciously large for a casual visit.
It resembled the emergency cash stash Wade kept locked in his study, a reserve meant for times when luck ran dry. Wade's phone buzzed, flashing Jessica's name. Her text read, "She's having a hard time. Love you." Wade's fingers hovered over the screen, but he didn't respond. At 2:15 a.m., Oliver arrived in person, carrying a case that looked like it belonged to a seasoned private investigator. Inside, GPS trackers, audio surveillance devices, micro cameras, and a complete dossier on Patrick Mullins. He paused before handing it over, lowering his voice. "Wade, whatever you're planning, I'm thinking about protecting what's mine. The legal system," his words trailed off, heavy with implication. Wade's response was as cold as steel. "The legal system protects people like them. I protect people like me." Oliver didn't press further. He handed over the equipment and left without another word. The next hour passed, with Wade studying Patrick's file as a general might study enemy lines before a decisive battle. The man's history read like a playbook for manipulation: serial seduction of married women, calculated theft of their savings, and vanishing without consequence. He'd done this in 3 states, always skirting the line of criminal charges without crossing it, thriving in legal loopholes and the blind spots of law enforcement. Yet Patrick's fatal error had been choosing Wade Wu. Wade's smile, tight and controlled, finally broke free from the strain. Patrick Mullins had never been forced to face real repercussions. He'd always walked away, smug in his immunity. Wade mapped out entry points and surveillance angles, but as he traced patterns of Patrick's past crimes, a more elegant plan crystallized. Patrick wasn't simply a thief. He was predictable. His modus operandi was disturbingly consistent: win trust, seduce the spouse, drain finances, create dependence, and vanish once emptied. The same pattern that had destroyed other lives now suggested something deeper. Patrick didn't just want money, he wanted power, humiliation, complete domination over another man's world. He wanted the thrill of watching a family collapse, and that hunger would make him reckless, blind to the traps laid for him. Wade's lips curled in a restrained smile. By dawn, Wade had crafted a preliminary strategy. He would give Patrick exactly what he wanted: total access to his life. But like a spider offering a web, that access would ensnare Patrick, drawing him in until there was nowhere left to run. Wade's phone rang. "Jessica." "Hi, honey." Her voice was soft and practiced, laden with feigned concern. "How did your emergency go?" Wade's answer, smooth and unflinching, came without a flicker of hesitation. Fine. Just a problem with the Morrison contract. How's Gail? She asked, her tone carefully casual. Better. Listen, I might need to stay another night or two. She's really struggling, he lied effortlessly. Of course. Take care of your sister, she replied, all the warmth of a worried spouse, none of the truth. Wade hung up and immediately looked up Gail McIntosh's phone number, his expression unreadable. He dialed with deliberate calm. Gail, it's Wade. I just wanted to check on you. Make sure you're okay. Her voice on the other end was confused, but steady. She hadn't seen Jessica in 2 weeks, hadn't heard from her, and hadn't a clue what Wade was talking about. It was confirmation enough. Wade thanked her and hung up, adding another lie to the growing pile he would need to maintain. Jessica hadn't merely betrayed him, she had built an entire alternate reality to support her deception. Sister visits, fabricated emergencies, invented weekends away. Wade's mind catalogued every instance now visible under the microscope of suspicion. But growing up in the streets had taught him that fantasies weren't harmless illusions. They were the death traps that swallowed the unsuspecting when reality arrived without warning. It was time to wake Patrick and Jessica from their constructed dream. Wade returned home that afternoon with the practiced calm of a man walking into a house he already knew had been violated, yet forced himself to scan every corner as though seeing it for the first time. The air inside felt thick with deception, though the rooms bore none of the usual signs of forced entry or careless rummaging. Everything appeared untouched, pristine even, as if the sanctity of the space had been meticulously preserved by someone careful, disciplined, and disturbingly skilled. But Wade's eyes didn't rest on the surface. He traced the edges of shelves, the locks on doors, the subtle smudges on the handles. His study held the telltale mark of intrusion. The safe, expertly opened and resealed without a scratch or trace. No fingerprints, no dust disturbed, no sign of panic. Whoever had done this had been methodical and practiced, and that alone confirmed the worst. Wade moved toward the hidden camera he had installed years earlier after a scare from a break-in. The timestamp blinked steadily. 11:23 p.m. The footage sprang to life, and Wade's jaw tightened. There was Patrick Mullins moving through his study with deliberate ease, photographing documents, copying files, and pocketing cash from Wade's emergency reserve without a trace of remorse. But it wasn't Patrick's actions alone that chilled Wade. It was the way he handled the space that revealed his contempt. At one point, Patrick picked up Wade's wedding photo, smiled as though sharing a private joke, and then flipped it face down before slipping it into the desk drawer with casual disrespect. Wade watched the footage 3 times, memorizing every movement, every glance, the pattern of his intrusion as though he were studying an enemy general before battle. The footage ended, and Wade sat for a long time, the stillness in the room pressing against his thoughts. He knew then that this was no ordinary betrayal. It was warfare. It wasn't just about stolen money or a broken trust. It was about conquest, humiliation, and the deliberate tearing down of everything Wade had built. He reached for the phone and dialed a number few outside his inner circle would recognize. Clarence Combs, Wade's childhood friend and owner of a security consulting firm with a reputation for handling problems that law enforcement either couldn't or wouldn't touch. Their bond wasn't forged by contracts or favors alone. It was built from shared struggles and debts paid in kind. Wade had once helped Clarence's family when insurance wouldn't cover a critical surgery, and that favor had been repaid in ways words could never fully explain. Clarence, I need a full team. Surveillance, counter-surveillance, asset protection. I need people who understand some problems, require permanent solutions. Clarence's voice, calm but sharp, came through. How permanent are we talking, Wade? I'll let you know soon, Wade replied, his tone clipped, already steering the conversation toward action. Within hours, the house was outfitted with surveillance technology so advanced that Oliver Doyle's setup seemed elementary in comparison. GPS trackers, facial recognition cameras, encrypted communication lines. Every vulnerability was addressed, every blind spot covered. But the tools were only half the solution. The other half came in the form of intelligence. Clarence sat with Wade in a dim truck-stop diner miles from town, sliding across a dossier that would make any predator think twice before entering Wade's world. Patrick's drowning in debts, Clarence reported without preamble. Serious ones. Russian import-export specialists, the kind that doesn't accept payment plans. Word is, he needs a major score soon, or he's going to have more problems than a cheating wife can solve. Wade leaned back, eyes narrowing as the pieces of Patrick's downfall clicked into place. How much? Wade asked, his voice steady but edged with anticipation. $250,000, plus interest compounding daily, Clarence said, savoring the weight of the revelation. Wade's lips parted, the corners curving with quiet satisfaction. So Jessica isn't just his target. She's his lifeline, he murmured, almost to himself. Gets better, Clarence added, sliding another report across the table. We checked your wife's financial activity. She's been moving money for months. Small amounts, split across accounts, always just under reporting thresholds. Someone taught her how to launder funds without triggering alarms. The waitress came by to refill their coffee cups, and Wade waited until she disappeared before continuing. How much has she moved? Best estimate? $400,000 over the past year, Clarence answered, eyes fixed on Wade's reaction. Money that's been siphoned from your business accounts, your personal savings, even from your retirement fund. Wade's jaw tightened. $100,000 at a time, stolen under the guise of discretion, using knowledge gleaned from schemes perfected elsewhere. It wasn't just theft. It was a slow disintegration of everything Wade had fought to build. His eyes darkened at the thought of sweat-soaked deals, long nights bargaining in back rooms, and risks that had paid off only through grit and resolve. That's more than money, Wade said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of betrayal layered upon sacrifice. Clarence's eyes never wavered. It's invested, he continued. Real estate purchases in Patrick's name. Offshore accounts. Ventures that don't exist on paper. They've been building a future together, financed by your past. Wade sat in silence, absorbing the scale of the assault on his life. When Clarence slid a final sheet across the table, Wade didn't hesitate to pick it up. I want to know everything, he said, his eyes locked onto his friend's with fierce resolve. Every account, every transaction, every lie. I want to know what they eat for breakfast, what they dream about at night. I want to strip it all away until they're left with nothing. Clarence nodded slowly, the respect between them unspoken but palpable. Consider it done, he said, as if sealing a pact that required no more words. Wade's gaze held a glint that made it clear this was not about vengeance alone. It was about teaching them, about restoring balance with a precision honed by experience. That night, Wade lay in the bed he had once shared with Jessica, eyes fixed on the ceiling as the weight of betrayal coiled inside him. Tomorrow, he knew, He would begin to unravel their scheme with a plan so thorough it would leave them wondering how they ever thought they could win. His phone buzzed in the quiet dark. Jessica's name flashed on the screen, followed by a message laced with longing. "Miss you. Home tomorrow night. Can't wait to see you." Wade typed a response without hesitation, the words cold and deliberate. "Can't wait either. We need to talk about our future." For the first time in months, the truth pulsed through his fingertips, not the hollow lie of a devoted husband, but the cutting edge of a man preparing to dismantle everything built on false promises. Wade woke before dawn, with the disciplined focus of a man preparing for war, his mind already locked on the tasks ahead. The morning ritual unfolded with quiet precision. Coffee brewed dark and strong, a shower that seemed to wash away doubt rather than cleanse the skin, and an intense workout in his home gym that hardened his resolve. But it wasn't the physical exertion that mattered most. It was the careful review of the previous night's surveillance footage, the cold dissection of each movement, each glance, each hesitation. Jessica had returned home at 2:47 a.m., moving through the house like a ghost, aware of the dangers lurking in every corner. She checked her phone obsessively, tiptoed through the rooms, even sniffed Wade's pillow, as though fearing the presence of someone she had betrayed. Wade's eyes studied her every twitch, every furtive glance, memorizing her unease with the analytical eye of a man mapping enemy terrain. By 9:30 a.m., Jessica had finally stirred from restless sleep. Wade, already gone under the guise of heading to work, had begun phase 1 of his plan. His first destination was the office of Maria Gamble, a private investigator renowned for uncovering fraud, embezzlement, and the tangled webs woven by desperate people. Years earlier, Maria had helped Wade uncover financial deception during a potential partnership, saving him from disaster. And since then, she had built a reputation for navigating legal gray areas without hesitation. Wade didn't waste time with pleasantries. He slid photos of Jessica and Patrick across her desk. "I need complete financial profiles on these two. Every account, every transaction, every asset, both legal and illicit," he said, his voice even but steely. Maria's eyes lingered on the photographs, her expression skeptical yet intrigued. "Your wife?" "My soon-to-be ex-wife?" she asked bluntly, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. "This won't be cheap," she warned, as though testing his willingness to pay the price. Without blinking, Wade opened a briefcase loaded with cash and placed it gently on her desk. $50,000 now. How much time do you need?" Maria's smirk faded into professional focus. 72 hours. But you're going to need it done in 48. Wade's eyes narrowed, his reply clipped. "You have 48. There was no room for debate, and Maria, recognizing the gravity of the request, nodded once, the challenge igniting something in her. Next, Wade visited his accountant, Howell Stevens, a man so meticulous that even the smallest discrepancy sent him into spirals of doubt. His precision made him invaluable for what Wade intended. "Al," Wade began, "I need you to restructure everything. Transfer ownership of the shops to a new corporation. Move all liquid assets to accounts Jessica cannot access. Create a paper trail that paints the businesses as struggling financially." Howell's face paled the way it always did when Wade spoke in absolutes. "If this is for divorce proceedings, it could be considered asset hiding," Howell warned, his voice low with concern. "The courts could get involved." Wade's reply cut through the air like steel. "I'm not getting divorced. I'm getting justice. There's a difference." and you'd better not ask me to explain it again." The quiet in the room grew taut as Howell weighed the ethical dilemma against years of loyalty. Finally, he nodded, understanding that Wade's decision wasn't one for debate, but for execution. Throughout the day, Wade visited each of his auto shops under the guise of routine inspections, but beneath the veneer of business oversight, he planted seeds of loyalty and trust among key employees. His conversations were casual but deliberate, probing questions about loyalty, confidentiality, and resilience without ever hinting at the storm gathering on the horizon. Wade knew better than anyone that loyalty couldn't be bought outright. It had to be earned. He reminded each employee, without appearing to, of the times he had been there when they needed him most. The Christmas bonuses that paid for surgeries, the promotions others wouldn't give, the second chances when mistakes threatened their careers, all those moments had woven bonds far stronger than money. By evening, Wade had assembled a network of allies prepared to stand by him when the walls of his life came crumbling down. The final stop that evening was his meeting with James Hernandez, a man whose title of business consultant barely concealed his reputation for solving problems the law could not touch. The private club downtown, with its exclusive membership and discretion, provided the perfect setting for their discussion. "I have a situation that requires a delicate touch," Wade began, his words measured, the pain and fury barely hidden beneath his calm exterior. As he outlined the betrayal, the theft, the deep wound of deception, James listened without interruption, his eyes narrowing as Wade spoke of love turned against him, trust ripped apart, and the quiet, suffocating rage that only comes from watching one's world collapse at the hands of those closest. When Wade finished, James sat back, silent for a long moment. "What's your endgame?" he finally asked. Wade's eyes hardened. "Complete destruction," he answered without hesitation. "I want them to lose everything they stole. I want them to learn what it means to have their entire life exposed as a lie. If they fight back, they're welcome to try." The coldness in his tone wasn't anger. It was certainty. James nodded slowly, as though the weight of Wade's intent resonated deep within him. "This isn't just about money, is it?" he asked quietly, testing the depths of the wound. "No," Wade replied, his smile razor-thin. "It's about respect, about consequences, about teaching them that there are men in this world who can't be stolen from, they can only be awakened." James's eyes locked with Wade's, and he knew this wasn't a game. It was war. "You have 3 days," he said. "I'll have resources in place within a week." Wade stood, his resolve steel-bound. The following evening, Wade returned home to find Jessica playing the role she thought necessary to maintain the illusion of a perfect marriage. The kitchen smelled of comfort food, and she hummed softly to herself, as if nothing in the world could disturb the fragile routine they had built. When Wade stepped through the door, she greeted him with a kiss that once might have felt like warmth, but now, under the microscope of betrayal, reeked of pretense. Her smile was bright, her eyes sparkling with concern that rang hollow. Wade swallowed his rage, knowing that to reveal the truth would unravel his plan too soon. Instead, he mirrored her performance, slipping into the guise of the trusting husband, the successful businessman too secure in his life to notice it being dismantled around him. "How was work?" she asked, the practiced softness in her voice betraying the unease she tried to mask. Wade's smile, calm and unreadable, barely twitched. "Interesting," he replied, careful not to betray the storm within. "I've been thinking about expanding. Maybe opening a 4th shop." The fork in Jessica's hand froze mid-air. Her eyes flickered with something Wade had learned to recognize. Panic, calculation, a flash of fear, quickly hidden. "That sounds expensive," she managed, voice cautious. "I've been looking at a place across town." Perfect location, but it would require a significant investment. Her words stumbled out faster than she could catch them, as if her mind had raced ahead of her lips. Wade's eyes narrowed imperceptibly, cataloguing each subtle change. "Maybe we should discuss any major financial decisions together," she said at last, choosing her words carefully. "After all, we're partners in everything." Wade's smile deepened, cold and knowing. "Of course," he answered softly. "Partners." That night, as Jessica slept beside him, her breath steady but shallow, Wade lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The lines between love and manipulation blurred, but he had long since learned that weakness invites predators, and strength must be wielded like a blade. Tomorrow, he would begin executing the final stages of his plan, a meticulous, devastating unraveling that would leave Jessica and Patrick begging for mercy. They thought they were con artists, predators themselves, but they had chosen to prey on the wrong man. Wade Wu wasn't a victim. He was the hunter who had waited patiently for the right moment to strike. The call came at 6:47 a.m., 3 days after Wade had set the gears of his plan into motion. And when Maria Gamble's voice crackled through the line, it was laced with equal parts excitement and revulsion. "Wade, you need to see this," she urged, breath tight with the thrill of discovery. "Can you be at my office in an hour?" Wade didn't ask why. The moment his instincts confirmed what he already suspected, he was on his way. The office, cluttered with documents and evidence, felt like the war room of a man who had been betrayed by those closest to him. Maria's desk was buried under stacks of bank statements, photographs, and transaction records that unraveled the scope of Jessica and Patrick's deception layer by layer until the enormity of it was impossible to deny. "Your wife is smart," she began, with reluctant admiration, "but Patrick Mullins is smarter and greedier." She spread out the financial documents like evidence in a courtroom and continued with clinical precision. "Jessica's been siphoning your money for 14 months, not 8. But here's the kicker. Patrick's been skimming from her every step of the way. Every account she opened, every investment she made using your stolen funds, he's been taking a cut. She thinks they have 400,000 together. He's got closer to 600, and half of that she doesn't even know about." Wade's eyes narrowed, a cold satisfaction settling into the depths of his chest. He scanned the documents, memorizing the patterns that revealed more than greed. It exposed their mutual manipulation, a parasitic dance of deception that had ensnared both of them. "He's planning to disappear," Maria added, producing a lease agreement that chilled Wade to the bone. Patrick had signed a 2-year lease on a house in Jessica's name, forging her signature and using her social security number. If things went south, Jessica would be liable for rent on a property she'd never seen, while Patrick vanished beyond reach. "Costa Rica," Maria whispered, as if naming it was enough to make it real. "A non-extradition haven for crimes under 50,000. He's setting her up to take the fall while he lives off their spoils." Wade's eyes gleamed with grim amusement. Patrick's schemes were calculated, but like all predators, he had underestimated the depths of his prey's resolve. "There's more," Maria pressed on, producing recordings, photographs, and sworn affidavits that painted Patrick as the consummate predator. He had been documenting everything: hotel meetings, phone calls, intimate encounters, all to build a case that would obliterate Jessica's reputation and leave her scrambling for survival while he portrayed himself as a manipulated victim. Wade's lips curved into a smile sharp as glass. Patrick's thoroughness impressed him, but it also confirmed that the man's arrogance had sealed his fate. He had refined his craft to exploit others without consequence, assuming that no one would ever challenge him. But in targeting Wade Wu, he had chosen a man who thrived on consequences, who understood how to weaponize patience and precision. Wade's only thought was that Patrick's downfall would be poetic justice. "I need copies of everything," he instructed, "and one more thing, I'll tell you later." That afternoon, Wade executed the next phase of his plan with deliberate calm. He called Jessica at work, arranging a lunch meeting at their favorite restaurant, the same one where they had shared their first date 16 years ago. Jessica arrived dressed to impress, nervous energy leaking through her practiced smile. Her eyes flicked constantly to her phone, a habit Wade now recognized as the tether that connected her to Patrick's manipulations. "I've been thinking about our future," Wade began, his voice conversational, as though nothing sinister lay beneath it. "About what we want from life." Jessica's brow furrowed, suspicion clouding her eyes. "What do you mean?" she asked, but Wade was already reaching for a folder, sliding it toward her with a casualness that belied the storm he intended to unleash. "I think it's time for us to make some changes." "Big changes," he said softly, watching her reaction. Jessica's eyes widened as she flipped through the pages, the color draining from her face with each turn. The folder contained property listings, investment plans, and photographs of a house in Costa Rica. Exactly the kind of arrangement Patrick had been pushing for months. Wade's lips twitched in a thin smile as he continued, describing in detail the benefits of relocating, managing assets offshore, and escaping domestic oversight. "I found this through a business associate, Patrick Mullins," he added with deliberate care. "You remember him, don't you? He used to work for me." Jessica's fingers trembled as she struggled to piece together the implications. "I don't understand," she stammered, but Wade's calm explanation gave every detail the weight of truth. "He's been helping me research expatriate living, tax laws, property transfers, ways to move assets internationally without triggering scrutiny. He's got experience with global finance," Wade continued, watching her struggle as the reality of their betrayal came crashing down around her. The color vanished from her face entirely when her phone buzzed. Wade saw the shift in expression, fear, panic, calculation, all flashing like lightning behind her eyes. She glanced at the screen, and Wade noted the silent scream that ran across her face before she hastily closed the folder. "I need to go," she said abruptly, her voice strained. "I'm not feeling well." Wade's smile remained composed. "Of course," he replied with practiced warmth. "Take the folder with you. We can discuss it tonight." Jessica clutched the folder like it held the blueprint for her own execution, and as she hurried out of the restaurant, Wade sat back, savoring the bitter satisfaction that she now knew the trap was sprung but couldn't escape it. Every choice ahead was poisoned, every option a step closer to ruin. Later that evening, Wade returned to find Jessica pacing the kitchen, her phone pressed tightly against her ear. The Costa Rica folder lay open on the counter, like a weapon she couldn't disarm. When she saw him, she ended the call abruptly, forcing a strained smile. "Everything okay?" Wade asked, his voice deceptively casual. "Fine. Just work stuff," she replied, eyes darting away from his gaze. "I looked over the documents. It's an interesting idea, But maybe we should think about it more. Actually, I was hoping we could speed things up. Patrick thinks some regulatory changes are coming that could make transfers more difficult. Wade watched the subtle storm of fear, confusion, and desperation flicker across her face, each micro-expression a confirmation that the trap was working. Maybe we should meet with Patrick together, she offered at last, as if that suggestion might salvage her spiraling control. Wade's smile stretched just enough to suggest agreement without betraying his intent. Great idea. How about tomorrow night? He replied smoothly. When Jessica went to bed that night, Wade called Clarence with a final instruction. Tomorrow night, Patrick's going to realize he's been outplayed, he said, without hesitation. Make sure he has no options left for running. Clarence's reply was immediate, decisive. Consider it done. Wade hung up and returned to his study, where he opened his safe and removed the final piece of evidence, a digital recorder containing every conversation between Patrick and Jessica over the past month. Their whispered plans, breathless confessions, and plotting had been laid bare, and Wade listened to their voices, steady and cold. He locked the recorder back in the safe, satisfied that the last move had been made. Tomorrow, they would learn that Wade Wu wasn't a victim, but a hunter who never lost.